In this video, we're going to work on basic nunchuck spins. The spins we're going to work on are hip, 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 shoulder, and hip, shoulder, catch. So when I hold my nunchucks, if you remember, we're going to hold way high at the top and then down a little bit. Hopefully, you already have learned forward spin with a catch, backward spin with a catch, and switching sides. I hope you've already covered those skills. The first one we're going to do today is hip, hip. It is super easy. We're going to hold starting in our right hand, and we're just going to go to our opposite left hip. When I do this, my wrist is facing in, and then I go to my right hip, and my wrist is facing out. Hip, hip, wrist in, wrist out. Hip, hip, wrist in, wrist out. So let's try this. Keep going. So one thing to note is that the chain is wrapping. So that wrap is why the nunchuck isn't hurting me. If I come away from my body and I hit myself with the end of the chuck, that certainly will hurt. So I want to wrap with the chain. Okay, so we did hip, hip. Let's try the left hand. Right hip, left hip. Wrist in, wrist out. Right hip, left hip. Wrist in, wrist out. Continue. Okay, so we should be able to do both hands with hip, hip. We're going to add on shoulder. So shoulder looks like this. Hip, shoulder. If I turned around, the nunchucks are coming in a diagonal across my back. So facing the rear, hip, shoulder. My bottom hand grabs on to secure. Then I can let go with this hand. I'm holding it in my left hand. Right hip, left shoulder. Right hip, left shoulder. I'm going to turn so you can see it from the rear. And again, I can release with this top hand. So I can do hip, shoulder, release every time. Are you getting it? All right, so hopefully this isn't too challenging. The next one we're going to do is hip, shoulder, catch. And this one does have a decent amount of technical skill involved. You have to place everything exactly quite right to get it where you want to go. So we're going to go hip, shoulder, catch. Hip, shoulder is what we just did. I'm going to still hold on with my top hand, throw it around my neck, and catch with my left hand. Hip, shoulder, catch, hip, shoulder, catch. A great hint if you're having trouble getting your chuck all the way around, when you throw it this way, you're going to throw your hand up high on your shoulder, and you're also going to rotate that throwing hand so that your pinky is up. That's going to give you an additional bit of length by turning that pinky up to your ear. Hip, shoulder, pinky to your ear for the catch. So it should look like this. Pinky up to your ear. If you're like this, you're taking away space. If you want to give yourself some space, pinky up. Let's try it 2 more times. Hip, shoulder, catch. One more time. Hip, shoulder, catch. Now I caught it in my left hand. So I can go ahead and let go with my right and do the same thing. Hip, shoulder, catch. Hip, shoulder, catch. Hip, shoulder, catch. Again, pinky up. Hip, shoulder, catch. One more. Hip, shoulder, catch. Release with your top hand. Let's try switching. Hip, shoulder, catch, switch, hip, shoulder, catch, and I switch with my back catch. We're going to do a rewind and a quick review on each of those skills. So we started with hip, hip. Then we switch sides, other way. Now let's do hip, shoulder. Let's do switch sides. And let's do alternating sides. All right, now let's go into hip, shoulder, catch. Hip, shoulder, catch. I like to spin into the back catch. It's my fave. Hip, shoulder, catch. Switch. Again, go. Hip, shoulder, catch. Switch it. Hip, shoulder, catch. All right, guys. So those are your nunchuck techniques for today. Practice strong. See you next time.